And compelling information from police and a crucial witness revealing new details about the savage murders of 4 university students. Yesterday, we saw furniture from the crime scene in Moscow, Idaho, being loaded into trucks and taken away. CNN's Gary Tuckman is on the scene for us as investigators try to work out exactly what happened inside that building.
In the probable cause affidavit, a Moscow, Idaho police corporal says after finding the victims who were killed, I noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed. The Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA left on the button snap of the knife sheath. Police say the DNA is suspect Brian Kohlberger's.
This is the house where the college students were killed. According to the affidavit, when police arrived, they went through that door where the Christmas wreath is. On the second floor to the right of the door is the bedroom where Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin were killed. Also on the second floor to the left in the back of the house, according to the affidavit, that's where the witness DM was. And finally on the third floor, you see that window right there. According to the affidavit, that's where Kaylee Gonsalves and Madison Mogan were, and that's where the knife sheath was found.
Based on the affidavit, it appears Brian Kohlberger has been near this house many times before. The affidavit indicating Kohlberger's cell phone signal was detected 12 times near the house over a period of 5 months prior to the murders. All of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days.
It wouldn't necessarily be suspicious if Brian Kohlberger drove past this house 12 times over 5 months if these were busy or prominent streets, or streets on the way to another neighborhood. But to come here, you have to be looking for it. These roads are windy, they're narrow, they're curvy.
In short, it seems difficult to accidentally end up here. The affidavit states that one of the students who survived with the initials DM heard crying and opened her door 3 times. She saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. DM described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past DM as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This turned out to be critical information because on November 25th, shortly after the murders, Moscow police asked law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra that had been seen near the murder site.
4 days later, police discovered a white Elantra in this parking lot just across the state line in Pullman, Washington. According to the affidavit, it was registered to Kohlberger, who lived up these stairs in this townhouse complex. Police acquired his driver's license information, and they say, according to the affidavit, that it was consistent with DM's description of the man she saw, who was wearing black clothing and a mask.
The affidavit does not contain information about motive or if the alleged killer knew any of the victims, but authorities could very well have leads about those topics that are not being publicly released yet.
Next Thursday in this courthouse behind me, Brian Kohlberger will have another hearing. This will be a status hearing to discuss scheduling in the case. Within the next couple of weeks, he will be arraigned, where he'll likely issue a plea.
Let's bring in now Tracy Walder. She is a former CIA officer and a former FBI special agent. Tracy, so good to see you. So I want to ask you about all of the things that we've been learning about the suspect, but I do want to caution viewers that there are some graphic details that could come up in our conversation. So do want you to be braced for that. So Tracy, what does it tell you? That the suspect was allegedly around the house multiple times before the killings.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Frederica. So what that does tell me is that he was indeed, unfortunately, stalking these victims, because what's also important is the absence of cellular information during that time frame of the killings that you mentioned. So to have your cell phone ping around that area when you don't live in that vicinity, his vicinity at WSU would have hit on a different cell phone tower. 12 pings in the time frame leading up to the killings, in the months leading up to the killings, that's significant. But what's also significant is that there was no cell phone activity for 2 hours.
Is it your suspicion that there was some sort of interaction? I mean, you are, using the word stalking. There was some interest that he allegedly had in these victims. Do you feel like it may have been precipitated by some interaction? I mean, how would you examine the evidence to discern that?
So one of the best ways to get information to discern that would actually be social media. Had he had any interactions just in terms of liking things on their social media or vice versa, I do believe, and I've always kind of aspired to this theory and agreed with this theory, that he came into contact, but it was most likely brief. It may not have even piqued the radar of the victims. And I believe that's probably how he selected one, two, or all of them as his target. So social media would really come into play there, as well as witness testimony of any interactions.
And then investigators clearly are probably still poring over all the social media, presence of any and all of the victims. And I recall hearing from many who have looked at a lot of the Instagram, there's a lot of information there. There's a lot of activity that has been posted by these victims. So police say Kohberger, he also cleaned his car very carefully and also took care of disposing of trash at his parents' house. So we know that he had been studying criminology. What does all of this tell you about his awareness, perhaps using information he has learned as a student? I mean, preparing himself for not just the crime allegedly, but for afterwards.
You know what's fascinating about that, Frederica, is I'm actually an adjunct faculty of criminal justice at Texas Christian University, and it's surprising to me how much he didn't learn necessarily. The reality is, and we teach all students, trash becomes public property once it's out there on the street. And so the fact that he was trying to circumnavigate that and place it into neighbors' trash cans is a bit shocking to me, quite frankly. And then also the fact that he was doing so in the reports I read on CNN at 4 a.m. FBI, myself included, we run surveillance all hours of the day. So he had to have known or suspected that he would have been watched had he done something like that. I do believe that he is arrogant and has an ego big enough to think that he is smarter than everyone else and that he had outsmarted the system.
Yeah, and as you really paint the picture on that, it makes me rethink the whole cell phone pings. Obviously, that is something that you would learn too as a student of criminology, all of the things that would be indicators that eventually can be evidence of your whereabouts and how he probably should have known that, but I guess didn't. So a roommate in the house, identified by the document as DM, said a masked person walked right past her as she opened up the door, and she recalls the bushy eyebrows, but that he didn't harm her, but that it was described that she kind of froze. I mean, what does that moment tell you about, maybe is it the element of surprise, or is there anything about familiarity, or what do you dissect from that moment?
So I just dissect a couple of things from that moment. First of all, a lot of people are being quite harsh to that young lady, and we don't know what we would do in a situation like that. I truly think that he probably didn't see her. I believe that she saw him. I looked at the floor plan of the house again just to kind of figure out what that angle would have looked like. I believe that after he most likely killed Xana and Ethan, he was just looking to get straight out of that house. And if she just had her door just cracked a little bit, he very well may not have seen her. And I think that she completely froze at that point. So in my opinion, that's what happened there. But I do believe Kohberger was probably familiar with the house and that he had to go all the way up to the third floor for two of the victims.